what our children or some of them are going through now. But the reality is we've all been through something. And I think what we have to do is we can't, the first thing we have to do is cannot give up the fight. You know, there's one thing about it. You know you're not going to win if you don't get in the game. You know you're not going to win if you don't get in the game. And life is a game that you can go through until God says no more. So this game is continuous. And that's the good thing about it. And there's always time. You know, you've got time right now. So I wish we could do more isolation. I think when we try to get our young men in particular in larger groups now, it's defeating because they feed off of each other, that negative energy. But the good news about this is that positive energy breeds within itself too. So if we could get more positive energy, more men around 2 or 3 guys, as opposed to 10 or 15 guys and 2 or 3 positive men. We need to reverse that in some kind of way. The job is monumental. The task is huge. It's not going to be done by us alone. You know, we're going to have to call on God. But they're missing that sense of home. I've talked to a number of them, and then here's the deal with our young people now. They are more afraid of living than they are of dying. And so dying becomes an escape for them. And that's their reality. And Jeff, it is more than difficult, if there's such a thing, to get them past that reality, because that's their reality. Just like this is a table to us, and that's a reality, right? But to them, death is the best side, you know. So I think what we have to do, we have to work tremendously hard, consistent, and not give up, to remind these young people that that's not a reality. Yes, death is a reality, but you can enjoy life in spite of, because that's a reality too, and God provides that for you.
You might want to clap to this. You might want to step to this. You might want to live by this. Yes, it is, y'all. Oh, today. You might want to clap to this. Your day. You might want to step to this. Oh, today. You might want to live by this. My day. Yes, it is.
Welcome to Just Men, a life-changing program that resonates hope as well as encouragement. The program that gives you information and inspiration for the glory of God. I'm your host, Jeff Tate, and thank you for joining Just Men. On today's program, we have a very special guest. You know, I've been waiting to have this gentleman on our program just to inspire us and enlighten us through his struggle, through his triumph, but more importantly, that he's here. Please welcome Ralph M. Thompson. Brother Thompson, welcome to Just Men.
My pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
Man, it's a tremendous blessing for you to be on Just Men. As I said earlier, man, you really add value to our show. It's a privilege for you to be on our program. I know we're going to talk about your life and the legacy and everything else in terms of what you put in motion. A lot of young men are following, man. They've seen something modeled in you that really is giving inspiration, particularly in relation to our young men who have kind of lost their way. So before we dive into the depth of your life and in terms of how you've been motivated, let's share a little bit about who is Ralph Thompson.
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for the opportunity to be here. Opportunity works 2 ways, and this is really a blessing for me to be here anytime and any way that we can get the message out to our community, not just the African American community, but the community abroad, because life is more than the race that you run on a track. Life is about the human race, and so I applaud you, and I applaud Just Men for doing this kind of thing, first of all. So it's really a pleasure for me to be here.
Wow.
Yeah. Other than that, it's not much to Ralph Thompson. You know, God is the extraordinary. I'm just the ordinary. And at times, Jeff, I don't know if you realize it, but I struggle to be ordinary. And so anything that we can do to help in any kind of way, I think what we have to understand is that that doesn't come from us. If I've done one thing well, it's been because of God. Because there's no way that Ralph Thompson can do anything good without God.
Wow. Talk a little bit about that process of even understanding that. I mean, many men struggle in thinking that it is about them. It's about their abilities and their accolades and their accomplishments and, you know, their passion. It's all about them and their motivation. And they feel that if they have that, then they're okay, and they are the captain of their ship, you know.
Yeah.
So talk
well,
a bit about
you know, I don't want to denounce that human nature to feel like, hey, this is what I've accomplished, this is what I've done, this is what I've said, you know, look at what I've done. I don't want to denounce that, and I don't want to make it seem like that, you know, Ralph Thompson have arrived because I'm still in flight. There's no way that I've arrived. Don't imagine I will, Jeff, until, you know, the Lord calls me home, and then I'm in His grace for salvation. But, you know, accolades, compliments, you know, those are good things. Those are not bad things, depending on what you get them for, of course. But those are not bad things. But I think what we have to realize, and it's just been recently in my life, I mean, just the last few years, literally, in my life, that I realized that, you know, you can't do anything good without God. And so any accolade that I've received from anyone, and I got to tell you, there were more times than I do it now, because I'm trying to make that transition. There's more times than I realized that I would say, hey, you know, I got awarded for something. Hey, you know, they said this about me. You know, hey, that's great. You know, you read an article or something, but it didn't take long to realize that, you know what, that's not about me. That's not about me. You know, when we reach out to our community, in particular our African American young men, because I don't think it's an unknown factor that our African American young men are struggling today. I struggled as a youth myself, and I understand it. A lot of people look at me now, and I just recently retired from Metro Schools, had 35 glorious years with the district, you know, some up, some down. But the reality is they were very good years, and I'm very grateful for them. But they see you sometimes, and they, man, you've got it made. And I think, no, you don't understand, far from having it made. But I think what has happened is that people see you at a different point, and they look at where they are, you know, and they somehow or another draw that perception that one has it made, and that's not really the case. You know, you can't have it made here on this earth, is my take on it. But as a youth, I struggled a lot, you know. I was typical from a single-parent home. People don't realize, for the most part, I lived by myself at the age of 14, had a loving mother, a loving father, 3 siblings. But as it is today, you know, domestically, it just didn't work out. So, you know, I was out there. Bless my mother's heart, you know, she was doing everything she could to keep us together. And my dad, many would say that he was a little unorthodox, and it was hard for me to understand him at times. But, you know, I came to really appreciate and love my dad. I spoke to him. I was the last one to talk to him before he died. I never will forever be with me. He was on the phone, and I got a call about 45 minutes later and said he had passed. Great man, great man. He just had a high school education, and people think, well, you know, he wasn't a doctor, he wasn't a lawyer, he wasn't a policeman, he wasn't a CEO, and this, that, and the other. But he was a child of God. I'm a child of God, and I was his child. And a lot of things my dad did and said that I didn't understand at the time, I came to understand, and I'm fortunate enough that I came to understand it prior to his passing. But it seemed to have just really taken on a different shape, new life of its own once he passed. And I think that's one of the things we miss today. You know, if we could just get our young people to listen now. You know, we live too much in the now time, and we don't hear now for the future. And I think those are things that we have to kind of work on.
Yeah, that's a whole nother level of consciousness when you start talking about mainly living in the present, living in the now. Some of our young men are still lost in thought. I mean, the mind is basically taken over and is pulling them either into the past or pulling them forward to the future, which really are illusions, because all we really have is now.
Is now. Is now.
All we have is now. And I know I talk to a lot of young men about breaking those bounds, those thoughts, those belief systems that have them so bound into that process. But you said something that's very profound, and I want to expand on, and in this developmental process of yourself. I mean, even being an educator and what you've been exposed to, what is it that helped you to start making this transformation? When did you have this sort of level of epiphany? What happened in your life to where you began to change your sense of direction? Share a little bit about that and how that is empowering you now.
You know, I really can't put my finger on any one thing. There were literally a series of events that took place. at the age of 14, 15, I was doing pretty much anything and everything, you know, that I thought I was big enough to do. You know, just using language that wasn't very becoming foreign language, and doing everything else, you know. And so, but along the way, things began to happen. You know, that was one of the most significant events in my life, of course, was the divorce of my mom and dad. And I can remember I was about 12 and a half, 13 when that took place, and I can remember sitting down crying, you know, because I didn't know what it all meant. I just knew we were not going to be together anymore. And you know, my dad, particularly during the summertime, would often take us on a summer ride on Sundays, and that was the time we really got to see that human side of Dad, and because he was a hard worker, construction, plumbing, he did whatever it needed. I mean, he worked at the post office for years, but that was one of the most significant things. And then, as I say, I just kind of went out there. I think one of the next significant things was there were 3 deaths in my family at a real young age. I was still in high school. I was a sophomore, junior in high school, and I lost my granddad, my grandmom, and my great-grandmother all in 1 week. And that was traumatic, man. I'm like, whoa. And then shortly before that, I lost my great-grandmother on my mother's side. That was maybe a few months before that. But those deaths, and that was the first time I'd come face to face with death, you know, with people that I used to laugh and joke and have a good time with, and, you know, go out and have cold drinks and eat potato chips and skins, ice cream, those kinds of things with. And it was not a wealthy situation, man. We were not wealthy. We were blessed. When that happened, there was a little bit of bitterness and anger. My grandmother, on both sides, really had always brought us up in church. But you know how it is when you're a young man, you go to church and you clap every now and then. You're like, what time can I get out of here? You know, do I have to go today? And this kind of thing. But and I didn't understand, you know, what was going on. And I'm gonna be honest with you, Jeff, I don't really understand today, you know, those kinds of things. I have maybe more insight. But those things were pretty significant. And there were some positive things along the way. You know, I stumbled through high school, was able to graduate. Whoa, you know. Was going into armed services out of high school. And I can remember my mother having a fit, you know, just breaking down crying. So, okay, I won't go, no big deal. You know, I didn't want to go to college, had no desire to go to college. I played a little sports in high school, was no star. I had an offer in baseball as a designated hitter. Wish I'd have took that, man. I told the people I don't want to be no designated hitter. I thought I knew it all. What did I know? But then I gave up the armed services and thought the idea and went on to Tennessee State University, majored in health, physical education, recreation, and those are some positive things. Lost some more family along the way. Went through some tremendous financial situations. My dad, after about half of my freshman years, you know what? I paid your first semester. We were on quarters. He said, you need to learn a little responsibility. Okay, Dad, what does that mean? It means you're going to pay for your own schooling. Oh, okay. So there again, some anger sitting in, some bitterness, but I can remember working 3 jobs. I worked at the United Methodist Publishing House. I worked at Hot Stop. They were Hot Stop then, and Mapcos now. And then I, in the summer and the fall, would umpire Little League baseball and so forth, which I coached, you know, Little League baseball. And I was always in and out. Some of my closest friends would always tell me I was the minister of the streets because the things that I would do obviously were not right, but I was like, man, do you really want to break in that car? You know what I mean? Do we have to? You know, I was just playing, you know what I mean? But so I always felt like that the upbringing in church, you know, God had his hands on me, you know, and not just for me, but for us all. Things happen. I think eventually you have to take heed, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I think that's one thing that I would like to see people do now is to take heed a little sooner rather than later. But there was a series of events, and then, I got married and had a son, was divorced. My son was beautiful. We still share a beautiful relationship today. I was pretty much destroyed by, the divorce, and but I gave my son up almost to hearing his mother. Fine. I went back to some of the old days. I'm not going to go through this, man. You know what I mean? Take him, go on. I can do what I want to do. Go on. I'm not going to pay a child support. I'm not going to do anything. Just go on. Jeff, that lasted almost 6 weeks. And I was miserable the entire time, trying to make myself be something that I really wasn't, trying to make myself be something that God refused to let me be. And I never shall forget the turning point in that was I was coming out of a friend's house, and my ex-wife had, we had mutual friends on that same street, not the house I was coming out of, I don't know, 10 or 12 houses down the road. I call it divine intervention to this day. They were driving down the street as I was walking out of my friend's house, and I walked literally in front of the car, and she stopped the car. My son was on the passenger side in his car seat. She rolled down the window. I reached in and got him out. And I said a prayer. And only God knows what that prayer was. And I know to this day, but I knew then there would be no more separation like that. I couldn't do it. A real good friend of mine, Jeff, to break it down to me, helped me to see. When I left Metro Schools June of last year, it was probably a couple of months or so before I realized that I was going through another whole transition. It was more like I was on a vacation. And then reality set in. And I had a friend, and she explained it to me. She said, you know what? You're going through some things now that I haven't seen before, and it helped me to realize that I'm transitioning, and I was feeling lost, even with God. And I don't want anyone to feel like Ralph Thompson has arrived. I told you again, I'm still in flight. I don't have this thing figured out by a long shot, and I want to be sure that people understand that. And so. I think one of the things that I can probably close with is saying, you have to prep with prayer and proceed. And that's what I'm trying to do right now, be known for being nice and not nasty.
Wow, that's beautiful.